Good to go?
Go ahead, Byrle.
Okay. What is a sponsor? According to the sponsorship and CoDA pamphlet, a sponsor is, at the most basic level, someone who can help the sponsee work the steps. When starting the steps with a new person, I suggest several different options. The simplest is to use the green workbook for all the steps. A more in-depth method of working the steps is to use the 30 questions for the first three steps. I will then suggest using the 40 questions for steps 4 and 5. The booklet Drop the Rock is not code approved literature. However, I will often suggest using it to work steps 6 and 7, especially if the new person is familiar with the 12 steps through another program. I will then suggest that the remaining steps be worked from the green workbook. We're getting some, I'm getting some noise from somewhere. So, if a new person is having difficulty getting started on the steps, I will often suggest grief work. Sometimes the new person has grief to work through before they can be ready to work the steps. The steps begin with acceptance. The stages of grief, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, end with acceptance. If a person goes directly into acceptance from denial, quite often the anger, bargaining, and depression are stuffed down and will come up later, usually at the most awkward of times. See, I emphasize that the new person is not in a race and that slow growth is good growth. Most, if not all, recovery involves the 3 steps forward, 2 steps back dance. In recovery, we take 3 steps forward while exploring new ideas and concepts in our recovery journey. Then we take 2 steps back to what is familiar in order to evaluate and integrate what we have learned. When the time is right, we again take the 3 steps forward, 2 steps back for another net growth of 1. Emotional sobriety. Emotional sobriety is the goal. Codependency typically comes from being raised by people who were not mature enough to be parents. For whatever reason, however, we arrive in adulthood not having all the tools we need to be an adult. What does recovery look like? In a word, maturity. That is my goal, to interact with the world as an adult rather than as an immature child. The steps are my action plan for maturity. Most people who come into CoDA don't talk very nicely to themselves. One of the issues I try to address early in a sponsor-sponsee relationship is self-talk. One of the tools I suggest for altering the way the new person talks to themselves is to change the phrase, I need to do this thing, to I want to do this thing. I just haven't gotten to it yet. With that little change, I can transform my self-talk from needy to goal-centered. Love it. Sometimes it's difficult to know when someone is ready to move on to the next step. The steps correspond with the promises. After completing a step, I go over the associated promise with the new sponsee and we assess how well they feel they are experiencing that promise. If they are experiencing that promise, then they are ready to move on to the next step. Finally, oftentimes after hearing a 12-step talk, many people, me among them, will only remember a phrase or two. I try to save those little tidbits of wisdom and encourage the people I sponsor to do so as well. By having a reservoir of little one-sentence witticisms, when I can't get my act together well enough to work a step, I work a slogan. My sponsees have honored me by dubbing my quotes Byrleisms. Here are some here are some that they have found meaningful. If you want what you have, just keep doing what you're doing. To get something different, you must do something different. A description of enlightenment. That's where you lighten up. See, if you can't think yourself into right behaving, try behaving yourself into right thinking. God has 4 answers to prayer. Yes, no, not right now, and if you insist. See, how I feel about myself in a relationship is far more important than how I feel about the other person or how they feel about me. Regarding relationships, slow is real. Fast is real fun, but slow is real. The negative mind will never give you a positive life. To quote, "Take it to the limit" by the Eagles, you can spend all your time making love, or you can spend all your love making time. Let's see, I don't punish myself today for not knowing the things I didn't know yesterday. Keep your head where your butt is. About finding dates in 12-step meetings. The odds are good, but the goods are odd. In relationships, two halves don't make a whole, they make a quarter. It's multiplication, not addition. If you make yourself happy, you know you've made at least one person happy.
¿Me escuchan en español?
Go on.
Are we on? If see, when I try to control something that is not my business to control, I am also being controlled. Everyone is doing the best they can with what they know. See, given the circumstances of my life up to this point, I am right where I'm supposed to be. A formula for determining God's will. Get up in the morning and start moving. And when you hit a wall, turn left. In other words, just go through the open doors. If I have to guess it's not true, it is okay to be sad. Sadness is a part of grief. If I deny/ignore my sadness, I'm denying my grief. The more I deny, the harder it is to let go. And funny thing about letting go, it seems I have to learn how to do it all over again every time I have to do it. Learning to let go is often about grieving. There is nothing that gives me a sense of self in quite the same way as enforcing a healthy boundary. Quite often, the most difficult thing to let go of is my own fantasies and illusions. See, if you are having trouble with the higher power concept that is talked about in the second step, somebody's not muted.
It's okay, bro. Just
okay.
We'll get it.
Came to believe that if you're having trouble with the higher power concept that is talked about in the second step, which is came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity, try replacing the word sanity with clarity. Anyone or anything that can help me have more clarity is a power greater than myself. Spirituality. I define spirituality as having a sense of connection to the world around me. There's nothing that connects me to the world around me in quite the same way as coming to meetings and sharing who I am, then having that accepted. I in turn get to accept you for being who you are. All my feelings bring me valuable information. If I stuff my feelings, I also stuff the information. And you can't simultaneously set a boundary and be worried about someone's feelings. The thicker a relationship is, the harder it is to let go of. Am I still on?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Unasked for advice is almost heard as criticism. Anything worth doing is worth doing poorly, but it's worth getting done. When I say it's not worth it, I'm also saying I'm not worth it. Make plans rather than planning results. If I'm confused about a decision, I try to put off making the decision. Frequently, new information comes in that makes it easier to make the decision. If I must make the decision, I try to just make the decision that keeps life simple. Serenity prayer. What is the wisdom to know the difference? If I'm trying to change something and it gets worse, I probably should work on accepting it. And if I'm trying to accept something and it gets worse, then I probably should work on changing it. And finally, this last one, most of my anxiety comes from believing my own conspiracy theories. I'm complete.
Thank you, Byrle. Thanks for a little bit of humor in your sharing. And we're going to take a break while